The other day, I was asked if Retail Minute is turning into a full-time job. I believe that question was somewhat rhetorical, but it got me thinking, how much time do I actually spend doing everything I do for and in relation to Optopolis? This is a question I've never really found a need or desire to answer before now. I would argue that the amount of time I am spending on everything revolving around Optopolis is... Actually, as it turns out, it's roughly the same amount of time it would take to do a full-time job and then some. Making some estimations, I easily spend 8 to 14 hours per week on YouTube videos alone, an average of another 2 to 4 hours per day on the Retail Minute, and probably about 3 days per month making articles on the Blogspot page. I probably spend at least an hour per day doing publicity and whatnot on social media, and this doesn't even account for all the other micro-sized tiny things I do in relation to Optopolis. If you add this up, I easily spend between 45 and 67 hours per week doing my channel. For context, your normal 9 to 5, which occurs 5 days per week, comes out to a total of 40 hours per week. And to me, this is a sign that things need to change. While I've been able to make this happen in this manner for the past few years, if I keep going in this direction, it's not going to be particularly bueno for me and therefore not bueno for Optopolis as a whole. Just to be clear, I'm not quitting YouTube. The videos will go on as long as I am able to do so for the foreseeable future. I'm also not quitting the Retail Minute, which I started in January, and that will also go on for the foreseeable future as well. However, I may back off in terms of the Blogspot page for now so that I can focus on doing everything else better. That being said, I would eventually like to get back into the Blogspot page, and that also doesn't mean that I won't be posting at all. It just means that the posts will probably be a little bit different and a little bit more focused towards Cheyenne's Retail Minute and stuff like that. I think it's helpful to acknowledge how this even happened because at least from my perspective, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense without giving some context. Officially, I started doing retail content, primarily videos on the main channel in 2019 out of a passion for retail history and urban exploration. Between 2020 and now, I've had a lot of personal circumstances happen out of my control that proved to be barriers in furthering my own life. On the flip side, I've managed to expand to new arms and legs of the Optopolis journey in the limited ways which I was able to given my circumstances the last few years. The Blogspot page is probably the most prominent expansion I made when I started regularly making articles back around the 2021 timeframe. The Retail Minute is the newest prominent expansion I made, starting it in early January 2026. We are now going on to the March edition, and with this edition, I'm hoping to pursue means of keeping it going. This past year or so now, my circumstances have shifted quite drastically, and I've found that new opportunities have been landing in my hands as a result. It became possible last year for me to finally start going out of town for videos again. Maybe not necessarily the most feasible, but certainly a lot more possible than it had ever been before. For the first time starting this past year and continuing into the current moment, I'm finding myself also actively exploring means to take things to a new level which I have not yet achieved in my life, and I'm starting to work toward those new goalposts. Part of these goalposts was briefly and lightly discussed in the last update video I posted in January 2026. Late last year, Toby Lyles of the Voices on the Wind podcast seen on the 24 Sound YouTube channel asked me a question for which I had no ready answer. What's next for Optopolis? My answer was that I anticipate easily doing this stuff for at least another 5 years, but I don't think that's the answer he was looking for, and it's not the answer I would have given if I had been thinking about it more at the time. Also, I believe I could do the Optopolis channel for the rest of my life in some format or another, but obviously I would like to not have it be so limited, meaning I'd honestly like to expand that part of the journey and make sure I'm still able to at least revisit the areas I've featured on the channel in the last few years. Ultimately, if all the things I do for and in relation to Optopolis didn't take such a significant part of my life, I think my answer would be that I would do something completely unrelated to Optopolis that I'm also reasonably good at doing. But alas, that's really not the case. I genuinely love doing this Optopolis stuff, even though it has kind of consumed my life in a way. And I also find that generally other people who seek the work that I have been producing, they generally like it. So I do believe that at this point in time, it is best that I just keep it going. With everything I discussed above in this video, I'd like to try and give an answer to Toby's question and hopefully answer it in the way which I believe it was intended to be answered, and also the way that I would have wanted to answer it were I thinking about the question at the time. I have already started on one of the next parts of Optopolis, which is the print newsletter blog page thing, a segment which I'm calling the Cheyenne's Retail Minute. This print element contains photographs and writings I'd otherwise look into posting online, but unlike the Blogspot page, this page is hyper-focused on the current events. That means I can write about significantly more retail happenings in Cheyenne compared to what I can do on the Blogspot page. Unlike my online pages, it'd be very hard for this print element to disappear. In the worst case that all the power everywhere went out tomorrow, it would at least be potentially possible to find a traditional printing press and build it that way. Cheyenne's Retail Minute is my response to just how fragile having an online presence can be and the overall shift in the state of the internet as it stands today. That is a whole video on its own too, by the way. There's so many things we could talk about, whether it's the slop taking over the internet, the fact that these platforms can quite frankly be turned off at the flick of a switch, or even the fact that it's just so easy to be deleted off the web in an instant. It's truly insane to me to rely solely on the internet for anything, certainly in 2026, and maybe that's the way it's always been. Another next part of Optopolis that I'm largely still figuring out and am actively pursuing is how do I sustain myself in addition to the channel. While I do currently, as of the time of making this video, make a little bit of money from AdSense and Patreon, and a few dimes here and there from photo licensing on Shutterstock, it's definitely not enough to be considered a living, and eventually all the funds I've previously made from those places have wound up funding this adventure of documenting places in some way anyway. At least for the foreseeable future, I wouldn't mind kind of keeping it that way where the money does go back to the channel, but perhaps maybe the channel could be supplemented by income from whatever other means I find to fund everything. I think in 2026 you'd have to be nearly insane to start your own business, but that's exactly what I'm figuring out how to do right now and what it looks like for me. The idea of doing some kind of freelance work is not a new concept that's crossed my mind, but 2026 is the first time in 6 years where I've actually actively stepped my toes into that water, so to speak, to see if something like that is even possible for me. Earlier this year, I bought a 360 panoramic action camera. It's no SLR by any stretch of the imagination, but considering its sheer small size, it can capture some pretty impressive photos, and with those photos I've found that I can assemble an explorable Street View tour experience that is accessible on Google Maps. I've experimented with this device at 5 different businesses now, including the Cowboy Emporium, Interaction Amusement Experience, and 3 different locations of Twinkle Twinkle Little Store, including their Delrange store, their temporary Delrange store, and their Ridge Road store. I am also considering other things I could offer, maybe digital storefront art, maybe regular still and motion photography capabilities, maybe some other things I just haven't fully realized yet. Maybe here, I could learn a thing or two from the Piano Doctor on YouTube and start doing some YouTube shorts maybe even. I don't know for sure, but the possibilities seem relatively endless in this respect. I don't think there's too much more I have to say about this topic right now, but I'd still like to give a huge shout out to my channel members on Patreon who make the journey easier to keep rolling. Until next time, peace out everyone.